Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. They wanted war! We gave them war. Savers versus speculators, Silver Liberation Army. We've got a major scalp. We've got Cameron and Osborne on the run. They are headed out the door. Yes! Stacy, tell us more.
Max Keiser. UK trade deficit hits record high. Surge in imports. Deals blow to government hopes for export-led recovery. Max Keiser, I credit you with blowing their hopes away. According to the article, the widening in the deficit followed a 3.8% jump in imports, driven by higher imports of chemicals, oil, and...
Silver! Silver!
That's correct. All you UK followers out there, you've been buying silver.
That's right. Silver's been massively flooding into the UK, causing this massive trade imbalance, completely destroying Osborne's attempt to stimulate economy using banking tricks and by appeasing the banking terrorists. The Silver Liberation took matters into their own hands. They're buying silver aggressively. The price is going higher. Now Osborne will be carried out on a stretcher because not only is he a plump little weasel who knows nothing about economics, but he's immoral, he's unethical, he's a schmuck, he's worse than Cameron, he's Cameron's little duck.
Well, the UK goods trade deficit with the rest of the world stood at £9.8 billion, much wider than the $8 billion that was forecast. There was an extra £1.8 billion of silver that they weren't expecting.
This is happening all over the world because the Silver Liberation Army understands that all these governments are corrupt. Same thing's going to happen in the U.S. The U.S. will shortly report similar numbers due to the incredible influx of silver and gold by people challenging the banks. The global Occupy movements, that's just a sideshow compared to the Silver Liberation Army. Global insurrection against banker occupation, kind of a sideshow when you compare it to the Silver Liberation Army that's on the march, that has now completely and fundamentally reshaped the global economy.
Well, the UK is also in the news here in the next headline, Max. Tobin tax is a tax on pensioners that will cost 1 million jobs, says Chancellor George Osborne. He says there is not a single banker in the world that is going to pay this tax. There are no banks that are going to pay this tax. The people who will pay this tax are pensioners. So if you want to go and introduce a big tax on pensioners, that is the end result, but at least be honest about who pays this tax. This is George Osborne referring to the Tobin tax, the financial transaction tax. Max, your thoughts? This
is an admission by Osborne that he has absolutely no control over banking terrorists. Remember when Bandar threatened Tony Blair with a 7/7 bombing unless he called off the investigation into the BAE Bandar slush fund? This is Osborne saying the same thing. He's no better than a terrorist. He's no better than Prince Bandar. He's no better than Tony Blair. He supports financial terrorists. He aids and abets financial terrorism. George Osborne, what will the people do to you when they catch up to you? What will they do to you, George Osborne? Are you looking over your shoulder? Do you feel comfortable walking on the streets? Do you? I wouldn't if I were you! He might be excited because he seems to be a bit of a submissive. And we know this from his history because, of course, a headline from a few weeks ago was phone hacking. Andy Coulson helped spin story of George Osborne and dominatrix. So apparently George Osborne had been involved with some drug-taking dominatrix. That's right. The news, the Murdoch press broke the story that Osborne was caught in an S&M imbroglio. He plays the role of submissive. That means that the prostitute that he hired spits in his face and slaps him around like a little biatch, as they say, uptown in the hip-hop scene. And he loves it. He loves to be That's his joy de vivre. It could explain why many people say that bankers are the ones responsible for installing leaders that then hand over all the assets of the nation to us. So it makes sense that repeatedly in the UK, since the deregulation, the Big Bang as they call it, we've had Tories or Conservatives in power because they are like the ones they always get caught in weird submissive scandals. So that could be what's happening there. So George Osborne is claiming, however, that this financial transaction tax is uniquely something that is being taken from the pensioners. Now let's look at what George Osborne and his Independent Bank of England have created with their quantitative easing. Savers lose £43 billion in slow-motion bank robbery with worse to come. Savers have been stealthily robbed of £40,
43 billion pounds of the real value of their savings since the Bank of England froze interest rates at 0.5% nearly 32 months ago, but there could be worse to come. So the average saver, Max, has lost 2,500 pounds since the crisis.
Right. How does that work exactly? Let's review briefly. To keep the speculators sweet, to keep the cost of money near zero, Bank of England keeps rates near zero using quantitative easing. Osborne endorses it. In effect, those people with savings, the pensioners, the people who have worked all their lives with money in the bank that they anticipate to get a return on, end up subsidizing the speculators. Why doesn't Osborne just write a check to the terrorists around the world and say, here's the money. Please, I'm a submissive. Can you bomb me, please? Because that's exactly what he's doing economically speaking. He is forcing against the will of the hostages, that is the UK public, to pay for the speculators by keeping interest rates at zero. Keeping interest rates at zero, number one, it doesn't stimulate the economy, obviously, because the UK economy is going straight into the gutter. Number two, it only feeds the worst elements of the society that are causing the financial terrorism, the speculators. This is unconscionable. This man is a stark, raving lunatic that needs to be put in a straitjacket and thrown into the maze.
So the article says that the pensioners in particular are largely silent victims of the Bank of England's policy of running negative real interest rates. So here you see the pensioners that George Osborne, the shrieking submissive, claims to be supporting by being against the financial transaction tax. And yet, because of the speculation and the wild derivatives trading and disaster and fraud that his bankers to who he submits, because of them, pensioners have already given up 43 billion pounds in only 3 years.
Yeah, and think of it also, this whole idea about you can't tax transactions because it would cause all kinds of duress in the economy. Let's flash to the Bank of New York story. For 30 years, according to Harry Markopoulos, who blew the whistle on Bernie Madoff, Bank of New York, which is a custodian for trillions of dollars of pension accounts, has been stealing 0.3% on every single transaction for 30 years. This is a $500 billion theft from savers. Is the stock trading down? Oh, it's trading up on the news because Osborne and Cameron and Obama and Bernanke submit fraud as their business model, and they're all submissive to the terrorists.
Let's move on to some more fraud and how, no matter what, the savers always pay. MF Global clients may have to share cash. So remember, this is MF Global, which is a futures trading firm that went bankrupt. It was run by John Corzine, the former head of Goldman Sachs, the former governor of New Jersey, a former senator. The firm went bankrupt, and they're still missing $593 million of customer accounts, which they commingled with their own. And now the liquidator is saying that unless the missing cash is found, people hoping to recover 100 cents on the dollar may have to give up some of it to other customers, said Stephen Harbeck, the liquidator.
Well, this is beautiful because, remember, people were saying, the system is broken because they are privatizing capitalism while spreading the risk socialistically. The people have to bear the risk and the insiders, the top 1%, take all the gains. And that was a bit of a concept, but now we have a direct evidence with MF Global. What they're saying is the insiders, including John Corzine, former Goldman Sachs guy, stole billions. And so the customers are going to have to pay for the other customers that have had their money stolen. So he didn't steal from every single customer. He stole from lots of customers. And the way they're going to bail these customers out is by having the customers that didn't have their money stolen from them to pay off, to share their money with the customers that did have their money paid off. What are they talking about here? They're going to share in the losses. What kind of ideology is that? How do they use, what propaganda are they using to get people to accept this as rational and okay?
Remember, last week we covered the story of the Chicago Board of Trade brokers throwing applications for McDonald's out the window at protesters, calling themselves the 1%, and suggesting that Occupy Wall Street people are the Marxists. There is nothing more Marxist than that which the Chicago Board of Trade traders created by having to share the wealth. Clients must share, redistribute their wealth due to their own absence of regulation, their absence of self-regulation.
Right. The CME traders in Chicago are pure Marxist, and this is a perfect example of that, and they themselves are barking up the ideological tree toward a system of governance that has absolutely nothing to do with free market capitalism, and to shower the protesters down below with help wanted applications for McDonald's has only got the silver liberation motivated to buy more silver, to put these guys like the silver stake through their heart into the ground, dead, dead, dead again.
And finally, Max, we have discussed before the use of Twitter and that these hedge funds are now using Twitter trends in order to trade. So I want to call your attention to this tweet from Becky Meehan of CNBC. And she said, Italian 10 trending on Twitter. I'm sure bond yields don't trend that often. So if you see from this image here, this is the trending topics. And sure enough, number 2 worldwide was Italian 10, the 10-year bond. What do you think of this, Max?
Well, this is what I've been talking about, price propaganda. On this show, this is the only show in the world that's gone into this idea of price propaganda. On Twitter, it's run by bots. Here you've got financial propaganda and hedge funds with unlimited resources creating robots to trend a topic, to force a topic trending on Twitter, which gets the hedge fund community all aligned on the same trade to go attack Italian bonds. But that's based on signaling to the group vis-a-vis Twitter their intention to financially devastate Italy with these sales and short sales and naked short sales. Remember, they attack Italian bond market with counterfeit paper, with naked short sales. There's no accountability in the system for the amount of naked shorts that they're attacking Italian bonds with. And they've gone from Ireland, they've gone to Greece, they've gone to Portugal, now they're in Italy, now they're talking about France. Every time the Eurozone creates a dollar or a euro in stimulus, they create 100 euros in naked short sales. They're never going to win that war. But the fact is that the tail is wagging the economic and financial dog around the world, and we're totally powerless against an entrenched kleptocracy with unlimited credit, 0% interest rates, with the central banks at their bidding, and politicians just basically lying down and doing nothing about it. So this is the new world order. It's complete manipulation, empowering. It's a kakistocracy. It's rule by the worst qualified. That's the global new world order. It's a kakistocracy. Rule by the stupidest and worst kleptocrats in the world. Okay, Stacy, Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there.